Today we're starting with the 2016 review, starting with the EOC amendments. So you need to turn to your first page, which looks similar to the one on the right side of my screen. The overall objective of today's video is to understand each amendment, be able to apply them to different relevant court cases that you've studied in your U.S. history class, and then by the time the video is over, you should have this paper completely filled out and ready to bring into class with you. So starting with the First Amendment, you need to type in or write in that this is the freedom of religion, of speech, press, assembly, and petition. We reference back to this quite often when talking about different court cases. One that I would like for you to include in the margin, or if you take notes off to the side, is Tinker versus Des Moines. This court case was relevant during the Cold War. This was when students John and Mary Beth Tinker were suspended from their school for wearing black armbands. They wore the black armbands in protest of the Vietnam War. When they took it to court, they wanted to see if their right to wear the bands were protected under the First Amendment with freedom of speech. It was found that, in fact, it was protected, but it's important in showing the impact that the anti-war movement can have, not only in what's going on politically, but in the social lives of Americans during the time period. For the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, we don't talk about it often, but overall, it's just important for you to know that that is the Second Amendment. Moving on, the Fourth Amendment protects against any unreasonable search and seizure. The Fifth Amendment are all of the amendments for those that are accused of a crime. Think about when people say, I plead the Fifth. That means they don't want to incriminate themselves. No, it's protection against self-incrimination. Amendment 6 is the right to a speedy trial by jury. The court case that I think of first when reading this is Hernandez v. Texas. When we talked about different civil rights amendments, this should have been one that came up. Hernandez was an individual that was found guilty of murder, but because the jury consisted of all one race, specifically did not represent any Mexican Americans who he himself was a Mexican American, then it was not showing that they had a jury of his peers. So Hernandez v. Texas. Amendment 8 is no excessive bail, no cruel and unusual punishment. For the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment are important because they're referred to as the Reconstruction Amendments. And when taking and studying your vocab quizzes, this should have been one of the key terms that you reviewed, the Reconstruction Amendments. Post-Civil War, there were a lot of questions about how to unite the United States and what should be done about all of the new citizens, specifically those that were before under slavery. And so these were to help unite the U.S., and so that's why they're called the Reconstruction Amendments. Additionally, the 16th, the 17th, the 18th Amendment, and the 19th are referred to as the Progressive Amendments. During the Progressive era, it was all about giving the power back to the people. I remember that because of all the P's: progressive, power, people. There's also a little jive that Miss Blake likes to do that my students often appreciate, and it goes, there's 16 tax dollars for 17 senators to buy 18 drinks for 19 women. So 16 is all about an income tax, which is why we say tax dollars. The 17th is all about power to the people and that the people vote directly for those that are appointed to local and state governments. The 18th bans the manufacturing and the sale and distribution of alcohol. And the 19th is women's suffrage or women's voting rights. When talking about prohibition, which is the term for the 18th Amendment and the banning of the sale and manufacturing of alcohol, some other key vocab terms you should be familiar with include bootlegging, speakeasies, the Volstead Act, and also the different suffragettes. Suffragettes specifically is about women's suffrage, but many of those who supported that also supported the 18th Amendment. During the time, many thought that alcohol was the root to a lot of the social problems. There are plenty of political cartoons that dive into some of the problems. However, the overall impact is that crime actually increased. If you ever have the opportunity to travel to Chicago, they have tours that actually go underground. They show where alcohol was hidden. It shows different bars that were underground or the speakeasies. But it's interesting to go back and see how times have changed. This changes all of our social culture during the time period. With specifically talking about women's rights, there are specific individuals that you need to be familiar with, including Jane Addams, Susan B. Anthony, Ida B. Wells, Alice Paul, and vocabulary to be specific as well, again with suffragettes. Suffrage in general is also one. So suffrage just means voting. The 21st Amendment is actually the cancellation or the repealing of the 18th Amendment, which is why I have a little drink next to both of them. Think of it like a banana peel. When you have a banana, you peel away the outside, and then what do you do with it? You throw it away. So that's another way to remember it. 21st Amendment makes alcohol manufacture, sale, consumption legal. You have to be 21 in order to legally drink. So that can also be a way to remember the 21st Amendment. The 22nd Amendment, I remember because it says you need to have no more than 2 terms. A president can only serve 2 terms. So think of it that way when you see the 2s on there. They can actually serve 10 years. So how is that possible if each term is 4 years? It's possible because if there is a vice president and the president is no longer able to fulfill their duties, the vice president could take over for 2 years and still serve their additional 2 terms, adding up to 10 years. This was a direct result because of Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, who served for 3 terms. Up until this point, there was really no restriction on how many terms a president can serve. It was just respected at that time that a president, or expected, I should say, that a president wouldn't serve more than 2. The 22nd Amendment makes it so they can't now. The 24th Amendment eliminates poll taxes. This was because of the Civil Rights Movement. It makes voting more equal, so that way everyone has the same opportunities. The 26th Amendment lowers the voting age from 21 years old to 18 years old. This was prompted by the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War, boys were being drafted at 18 years old to serve in the war. However, they weren't even old enough to impact the government policies that were making them be drafted. And so it lowers the voting age from 21 until 18. So overall, looking at the court cases and also the amendments in today's video, our objectives were to understand each amendment, apply them to relevant court cases, and complete this paper. So if you go through here and you still have questions in terms of application or in terms of definition, what each of these mean, coming into class next time, you should come in prepared with questions about this and ready to move on.